I always believed that silence has a sound. Sometimes it's the sound of peace, like when you're alone in a house after a long day of wars in the boardroom, with a glass of wine in hand. But that night, the silence that hung over my soul, even amidst 300 people talking and laughing, sounded like a muffled scream. It sounded like a warning. I stood at the top of the grand marble staircase of the Plaza Hotel, looking down at the ballroom I had rented for a sum that could buy a small house in the suburbs. The theme was Silver and Eternity. Hundreds of white roses imported from Ecuador adorned every table, intertwined with ribbons of silver silk. Crystal chandeliers, polished to perfection, cast a soft golden light over the city's elite. Bankers, politicians, competitors, and allies, everyone was there to witness the triumph of the Sterlings, or, more specifically, the triumph of my husband, David. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. It was a custom-made charcoal Oscar de la Renta. I felt beautiful, but I also felt heavy, as if the sequins were made of lead. I caught my reflection in one of the antique mirrors in the hallway. At 52, I didn't try to look 20. I had the laugh lines of a woman who had spent sleepless nights reviewing contracts, who had cried in office bathrooms when negotiations failed, and who had laughed out loud when stocks soared. I was proud of my age. I was proud of the empire my father, Arthur Vance, had built with his bare hands, and that I, his only daughter, had expanded into 10 countries. But that night, no one was there to celebrate Elena Vance, the businesswoman. They were there to celebrate Elena Sterling, the devoted wife, and mostly, to fawn over David Sterling, the charismatic CEO everyone believed was the genius behind our recent success. "You look radiant, Elena," a voice said behind me. I turned to see Mrs. Calloway, one of our company's largest shareholders. She held a glass of champagne and looked at me with that kind of scrutiny only old society matriarchs possess. "Thank you, Margaret," I replied, forcing the smile I had perfected over 3 decades of corporate dinners. "It's a special night. 25 years, she sighed, shaking her head, her diamonds catching the light. It's rare to see that these days, especially with a man like David. So dynamic, so full of energy. You must have a lot of work keeping up with him, dear." Those words were like tiny needles. Keeping up with him, as if I were a slow accessory, dragging myself behind the great man. "David has a lot of energy, yes," I agreed diplomatically. "But Vance Global needs more than energy. It needs direction, and that's what I'm there for." Margaret laughed, a dry, condescending sound. "Oh, of course, dear. Your father would be so proud of how you support your husband. It's so noble to let the man shine. Many heiresses wouldn't have that humility." I gripped the stem of my glass so hard I feared it would snap. Humility. Is that how they saw it? Did they not see the hours I spent correcting David's error-filled financial reports? Did they not know that the merger with TechCorp, which David loved to brag about on the golf course, only happened because I had known their CEO since childhood and negotiated the terms secretly while David was busy choosing the color of the new company jet? I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "I don't support him. I carry him." But I said nothing. I just smiled. Because it was my silver anniversary, and I loved David, or at least I loved the memory of the man he used to be. The graphic design student with holes in his shoes who used to take me for hot dogs in the park and swear that one day he would give me the world. I didn't need him to give me the world. I had already inherited one. I just needed him to be loyal. "Excuse me, Margaret," I said. "I need to find the groom. It's almost time for the toast." I descended the stairs, diving into the crowd. The scent of expensive perfumes and the sound of live jazz filled the air. People stopped to greet me, but their eyes quickly drifted, searching for David. "Where is the man of the hour?" a senator asked, shaking my hand absent-mindedly. "He must be accepting congratulations," I lied for the 10th time. But the truth was, I hadn't seen David for nearly an hour, and more worryingly, I hadn't seen Brenda. Brenda, my sister-in-law, David's younger sister, the woman I had pulled out of the gutter, metaphorically and almost literally. When Brenda's first husband left her with gambling debts and 2 small children, who paid her mortgage? Me. When she couldn't get a job because her resume had a 10-year gap, who created a public relations manager position at Vance Global just so she could have a salary and dignity? Me. I promoted her, year after year, ignoring HR's whispers about her incompetence, about the 3-hour lunches, about the arrogant attitude with assistants. I did it because David asked me to. She's family, Elena, he would say with those puppy dog eyes. Family takes care of family. I took that motto seriously. I gave her shares. I gave her power. I made her VP of operations. And how did she repay me? By arriving late to meetings and rolling her eyes when I spoke. But I never imagined her ingratitude went beyond laziness. I never imagined it was malignant. I kept walking through the hall, feeling a knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just their absence. It was an instinct. Something was wrong. The atmosphere felt charged, electric, like the air before a summer storm. I checked the main bar. Nothing. I checked the smoking area. Nothing. I even checked the kitchen, thinking David might be greeting the chef, something he did to appear like a man of the people. Nothing. That was when I saw Mrs. Higgins, the company's oldest executive secretary, sitting near one of the large French windows that led to the private terrace. She looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, approaching. "Have you seen David?" She jumped, nearly dropping her purse. "Oh, Mrs. Vance. Mrs. Sterling. She looked nervously at the heavy velvet curtains covering the terrace door. "I think he went to get some air. With Brenda. And that new consultant, Miss Vanessa." Vanessa. The name made my blood run cold. Vanessa had joined the company just 3 months ago as a digital innovation consultant. Brenda had recommended her fervently. "She's a genius, Elena," Brenda had insisted. "She's going to modernize our brand." I had my doubts. Vanessa was 28, had a degree from an online university I'd never heard of, and a wardrobe that looked more suitable for a Miami nightclub than a corporate boardroom. But David was enchanted. "Let the girl try, Elena. You're too stuck in old methods. We need new blood." New blood. I looked at the closed curtains. There was a tiny sliver of light coming from outside, and if I concentrated, I could hear the murmur of voices. Why would they be out there, in the November cold, while 300 people waited inside? Why hide? I could have sent a waiter to fetch them. I could have burst in making noise, laughing, announcing my arrival. Any sane person would have done that. But in that moment, the loving wife, Elena, died a little, and the Arthur Vance's daughter took control. My father always taught me, in business and in war, never enter a room without knowing what is happening inside. Information is the deadliest weapon. I took off my high heels, holding them in one hand so I wouldn't make noise on the wooden floor near the door. I approached the curtains like a ghost at my own party. The sound of the jazz band muffled most of the hall's noise, creating a bubble of isolation around that door. I pressed my ear to the crack. The wind outside carried the voices with crystal clarity. "She's getting impatient inside, David." It was Brenda's voice. Shrill, anxious. "My mother said she's already looking for you with that boss face she makes." "Let her look," David replied. His voice was slurred, relaxed, likely from the expensive cognac he was drinking. "Tonight is my night, Bren. She won't make a scene in front of the senators. She's too controlled for that. Controlled or dead inside." That was a third voice. Soft, husky, seductive. Vanessa. My heart skipped a beat. The disrespect in her tone was physical, like a slap in the face. "She's not dead," David laughed, and the sound split my heart in two. "She's just antique. Elena is like a typewriter, you know? Reliable, sturdy, did the job for years. But now we're in the age of the iPad. Nobody wants a typewriter taking up space on the desk." I brought a hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Typewriter. Is that how he saw the woman who built his career? The woman who proofread his emails so he wouldn't look like a functional illiterate? "That's exactly why you need to act soon, David," Brenda insisted. "The plan is ready. Vanessa has already prepared the dossier. If we present the motion of incompetence at the next board meeting, citing her refusal to adopt the new AI technologies Vanessa suggested, the shareholders will be terrified. They'll see Elena as a risk to profits. And with you as absolute CEO," Vanessa's voice whispered, and I could hear the rustle of fabric as if she were moving closer to him, "and me as your chief strategy officer. We could double this company's value in 2 years. Without that old woman holding the reins and talking about ethics and legacy. Nobody cares about legacy, David. They care about money." I peeked through the crack. What I saw made my stomach churn. David was leaning against the stone railing, smoking a cigar. Brenda was beside him, holding a tablet, showing him some chart. And Vanessa. Vanessa was in front of David, her hands resting on the lapels of his tuxedo, smoothing the fabric with a possessive familiarity. "Are you sure she won't fight?" David asked, looking at Vanessa with a hunger he hadn't directed at me in a decade. "How will she fight?" Brenda mocked. "She loves you, David. She's pathetic for you. If you say you need to take full control to save the company and suggest she retires to rest and travel, she'll sign anything. She trusts you blindly. She is weak." "Weak," David repeated, smiling. He leaned in and kissed Vanessa. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, proprietary kiss, right there on the balcony of our 25th anniversary party. Brenda didn't even look away. She was smiling, approving the union, approving the betrayal. "Then it's decided," David said, pulling away from Vanessa but keeping his hand on her waist. "Tomorrow the lawyers draft the paperwork. Monday we call the emergency meeting. And today I'll go in there, cut that ridiculous cake, smile for the cameras, and pretend I'm the luckiest man in the world for 2 more hours. Just 2 hours," Vanessa said, "and then the future is ours." I stepped away from the door. The world seemed to spin. The floor beneath my feet felt unstable, weak, pathetic. Typewriter. They weren't just having an affair. They weren't just stealing money. They were planning a coup. They were using my love, my trust, and my generosity as weapons against me. They thought I was stupid. They thought that because I was kind, I didn't have teeth. I looked at my shoes in my hand. Jimmy Choo, stilettos, sharp as daggers. I put them back on, slowly. I straightened my posture. I wiped a single tear that had escaped, minimally smudging my eyeliner. They wanted the future. They wanted innovation. I was going to give them a history lesson they would never forget. I was going to show them why Arthur Vance used to say his daughter was the only shark he respected. I didn't go back to the party crying. I didn't go to the bathroom to fix my makeup. I walked straight to the stage where the band was playing. The old Elena would have waited. The old Elena would have tried to talk at home. But the old Elena died on that cold balcony. I climbed the steps of the stage. The lead singer stopped singing, surprised. I extended my hand. "The microphone," I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He handed it to me. The sharp sound of feedback cut through the air, causing everyone to turn. 300 faces looked at me. I saw my mother worried. I saw Mrs. Calloway curious. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs felt like rocket fuel. "Ladies and gentlemen," my voice echoed, powerful, filling every corner of the Golden Hall. "I apologize for the interruption, but it seems my husband, my sister-in-law, and our consultant are having a very important business meeting on the terrace. And as CEO of this company, I hate being excluded from important meetings." I saw the terrace curtains fly open abruptly. David appeared, eyes wide with panic. Brenda right behind him, pale. I smiled at them, a smile that didn't promise silver. It promised blood. "Please, David," I called out, waving him over as if calling a dog. "Bring your team to the stage. I think everyone here would like to hear about your plans for the future of my company." David walked towards the stage. I watched him approach with a fascination that bordered on scientific curiosity. It was amazing, really, how quickly he could switch masks. 1 minute, he was a conspirator in the shadows, plotting the demise of his wife. The next, he was the golden boy, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, flashing that dazzling, symmetrical smile that had fooled investors, and, admittedly, me, for decades. Brenda followed him, smoothing down her dress, looking annoyed rather than guilty. That was Brenda's default setting. Indignation. She always acted as if the world owed her something and was late on the payment. Vanessa trailed behind them, hesitating. She looked like a deer that had wandered onto a highway, blinded by the lights, sensing the danger, but unsure which way to run. As David climbed the steps to the stage, he reached out for the microphone in my hand. It was a reflexive gesture. He was used to taking things from me. He was used to me handing over the spotlight, stepping back into the shadows, and applauding his brilliance. "Thank you, darling," he said, his voice loud enough to be picked up by the mic, though I hadn't relinquished it. "I assume you want to make a toast to the team? Or perhaps announce the new quarterly goals?" He laughed, a nervous, hollow sound. "Elena is always working, folks, even on our anniversary." He pulled at the microphone. I didn't let go. For a second, we stood there, locked in a silent struggle. His smile faltered. He looked into my eyes and saw something he hadn't seen since the hostile takeover of '98. A wall of steel. "Let go, Elena," he hissed, his lips barely moving. "You're making a scene." "No, David," I replied, my voice amplified, booming through the speakers, causing a feedback whine that made the guests wince. "I'm not making a scene. I'm making an executive decision." I pulled the microphone away from him. He stumbled slightly, his composure cracking. "Please," I gestured to the center of the stage. "Stand there, all three of you, in the light. I want everyone to see the future of Vance Global." The room was deathly silent. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The waiters stood frozen against the walls. 300 pairs of eyes were glued to the stage. It was the kind of tension that makes the air feel thin, hard to breathe. "You know," I began, pacing slowly across the stage, looking out at the crowd. "My husband and my sister-in-law were just discussing my management style on the terrace. They called me, what was the word, Brenda?" I turned to her. She crossed her arms, looking defiant. "I don't know what you're talking about, Elena. You're drunk." "Stale," I said, ignoring her accusation. "They called me stale, like old bread. They said I was a machine from the past. And Vanessa here." I walked over to the young consultant. Up close, I could smell her perfume. It was heavy, floral, and cheap. Vanessa said I was dead inside, that I was just an obstacle to be removed so that the real visionaries could take over. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Margaret Calloway dropped her fork. "Elena, stop this!" David shouted, abandoning his charm. "This is insane. You are imagining things. We were talking about—" "I was going to wait," I interrupted him, my voice rising. "I was going to wait until Monday. I was going to let you have your cake and eat it too. But then I realized something. Why wait? Why let you sleep in my bed one more night thinking you had won? Why let you drive my car home thinking you were the driver, when you've always just been a passenger?" I reached into the pocket of my dress, thank God for designers who include pockets, and pulled out my phone. "You see, David," I said, holding the phone up. "You called me a typewriter, old technology, but even typewriters can record history. And modern phones? They have excellent voice memo features." I tapped the screen. I held the phone up to the microphone. The speakers crackled for a second, and then the sound of the wind on the terrace filled the ballroom. And then the voices, crystal clear. "She's stale, David. Look at her. She's stuck in the past." Brenda's voice. "I know, Bren, but what can I do? She's the face of the brand." David's voice. "Retirement suits her, David. Power suits us." Vanessa's voice. "She trusts you blindly. She is weak." David's voice. I let the recording play until the sound of their laughter faded into the electronic hiss. I pressed stop. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of shock, of judgment. I saw shareholders looking at David with disgust. I saw my mother crying in the front row. David looked like he had been punched in the gut. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Brenda looked pale, her defiance replaced by terror. Vanessa was trembling so hard her bracelets jingled. "Weak," I repeated softly into the mic. "You called me weak because I loved you. You called me weak because I gave you a career, a home, a life. You mistook kindness for blindness, David, and that is the fatal error of every narcissist." I paused. I needed to breathe. The adrenaline was making my hands shake, and I hid them behind my back. This moment, this public execution of my marriage, was the hardest thing I had ever done. I want to pause here for a second and ask you, the listener, a serious question. I need you to be honest with me in the comments below. If you were standing on that stage, with the audio proof of your husband and sister-in-law plotting to steal your life's work, would you have stopped there? Would you have just embarrassed them and walked away? Or would you do what I did next? Would you burn their entire world to the ground to make sure they could never hurt you again? Let me know what you would do, because some people say I was too cruel. I say I was just being efficient. I looked at the board of directors table. Mr. Thompson, the chairman, was standing up. His face was red with fury. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at David. "David," I said, drawing his attention back to me. "Do you remember the bylaws of Vance Global? Specifically, Article 5 regarding code of conduct and loyalty?" "Elena, please," David whispered, tears welling in his eyes. He reached out a hand towards me. "Don't do this. Not here. We can fix this. I was drunk. It was just talk. I love you. You love my shares." I corrected him. "You love the power I lent you. But the lease is up." I turned to the crowd, addressing the shareholders directly. "As the majority shareholder of Vance Global, owning 51% of the voting stock, and as the chairwoman of the board, I am hereby calling an emergency motion." "No!" Brenda shrieked. "You can't. You need a quorum. You need notice." "All the board members are present, Brenda," I said, gesturing to the tables. "And the notice is right here." I pointed to the phone. "I move to immediately terminate David Sterling as CEO for cause, specifically conspiracy to defraud the company in breach of fiduciary duty," I declared. "And I move to terminate Brenda Sterling as VP of Operations for gross insubordination and plotting against the company leadership." I looked at Mr. Thompson. "Chairman, do I have a second?" "Seconded!" Mr. Thompson shouted, banging his fist on the table so hard his wine glass jumped. "All in favor?" I asked. Every single hand at the board table went up. Even David's golfing buddies raised their hands. They knew which way the wind was blowing. They knew who really owned the ship. "Motion carried," I said, my voice cracking slightly with the weight of the moment. I turned back to David. He was slumped over, defeated. The golden aura was gone. He looked small. He looked like the broke student I had met 30 years ago, only without the potential. "You're fired, David," I said. "Both of you. Security is already clearing out your offices. Your access badges have been deactivated. And since the company pays for your lease on the penthouse, David, you have until midnight to vacate the premises." "Midnight?" David choked out. "Elena, be reasonable. Where will I go?" I looked at Vanessa. She was trying to edge away, trying to distance herself from the sinking ship. "Why don't you ask your partner?" I suggested. "She seems very innovative. I'm sure she has a couch you can sleep on. Power suits you too, remember? Security guards, men I had known for years, men who had guarded my father, stepped onto the stage. They didn't look at David with respect anymore. They looked at him like he was the intruder. "Mr. Sterling," the head of security said, placing a heavy hand on David's shoulder, "we need to escort you off the property. Now." David looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only hate. Pure, unadulterated hate for the woman who had dared to be smarter than him. "You'll regret this, Elena," he spat as they dragged him away. "You can't run this company without me. It will crumble. You're nothing without me." "I guess we'll see," I whispered to the empty space where he used to stand. Brenda was screaming as they let her out, threatening lawsuits, threatening to tell my secrets. But nobody was listening. The jazz band started playing again, awkwardly, a slow, mournful tune. I stood alone on the stage. The golden couple was destroyed. My family was gone. But as I looked out at the room, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel stale. I felt something I hadn't felt in 25 years. I felt free. But David wasn't wrong about one thing. He wasn't going to go down without a fight. He had one last card to play, a legal loophole he had planted in his contract years ago, hidden in the fine print, designed for this exact moment. He thought he was checkmated, but he was about to try and flip the board. The weekend that followed the party was a blur of silence, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. I stayed in the house, my house, wandering through the empty rooms. I had ordered the staff to pack David's belongings into boxes and leave them in the garage, but the ghost of his presence still lingered, the smell of his cologne in the closet, the indent of his head on the pillow. It was tempting to just lay in bed and cry, to mourn the 25 years I had apparently wasted. But I didn't have time for grief. Grief is a luxury for people who aren't under siege. I knew David. I knew his pride. He wouldn't just walk away. He would come back, and he would come back with an army. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. I dressed not for a day at the office, but for a funeral, or perhaps an execution. I chose a black tailored suit, sharp enough to cut glass, and pulled my hair back into a tight chignon. No soft edges. Not today. When I walked into the lobby of Vance Global at 8:20 a.m., the atmosphere was suffocating. The air conditioning hummed too loudly. The receptionist, usually a cheerful young woman named Sarah, looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," she whispered. reverting to my maiden name without me even asking. They are already in the boardroom. Security tried to stop them, but Mr. Sterling brought legal counsel. They threatened a lawsuit if we didn't grant access. "It's fine, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the nausea churning in my stomach. "Bring coffee, black, and make sure the recording system in the boardroom is active." I walked to the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. My father had built this room to intimidate. The table was a 20-foot slab of black walnut. The chairs were high-backed leather. It was a place where empires were built. And today, it was where a marriage would be legally dissected. I pushed the doors open. David sat at the head of the table, my father's seat. He looked terrible, yet arrogant. His eyes were rimmed with red, his skin sallow, but his posture was defiant. Flanking him were 3 men in suits that cost more than most people's cars. I recognized the one in the middle, Marcus Thorne, a corporate shark known for tearing prenuptial agreements into confetti. Brenda was there too, sitting to David's right. She looked less like a VP and more like a cornered animal, her eyes darting around the room, vibrating with nervous energy. "You're late," David said, checking his Rolex, a watch I had bought him for his 40th birthday. "I'm not late, David," I replied, walking to the opposite end of the table and remaining standing. "I'm the owner. Time starts when I arrive." Marcus Thorne didn't waste time on pleasantries. He slid a thick leather binder across the polished wood. It stopped exactly in front of me. "Mrs. Sterling," Thorne began, his voice smooth and oily. "We are here to discuss the terms of your husband's abrupt departure. We believe there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the company bylaws." "There is no misunderstanding," I said, not opening the binder. "I fired him for cause. Conspiracy. Insubordination." Thorne smiled, a patronizing tilt of his lips. "According to Article 14, Section B of Mr. Sterling's employment contract, conspiracy must be proven by a court of law to negate severance. As of today, these are just allegations from an estranged wife during a marital dispute. Therefore, the golden parachute clause remains in effect." He opened a file in front of him. $10 million in immediate severance pay, accelerated vesting of all stock options, currently valued at another $15 million. And, of course, a public retraction of your statements at the party to prevent a defamation suit. Brenda piped up, her voice shrill. "And for me, too. You fired me in front of 300 people. I have a reputation. I want $5 million for emotional distress and wrongful termination." David leaned back, putting his hands behind his head. He looked at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "It's simple math, Elena. You can fight us in court for 5 years, drag the company name through the mud, crash the stock price, or you can cut the check. You want me gone? Pay me. It's the cost of doing business." I looked at them. They were so confident. They thought they had trapped me in a corner of legal technicalities. They thought I was the emotional wife who had acted on impulse on Saturday night. They had no idea I had spent the last 48 hours with the head of IT and a team of forensic auditors. Article 14, Section B, I repeated softly. The golden parachute. Yes, my father hated that clause. He called it insurance for failure. I picked up the binder and walked over to the shredder in the corner of the room. I fed the document into the machine. The sound of tearing paper was violent, loud, filling the silence of the room. "What are you doing?" David stood up, alarmed. "That's a legal document. It's fiction," I said, turning back to face them. "Because you forgot about Article 4. I pressed a button on the remote control in my hand. The lights dimmed, and the massive screen behind David flickered to life. Article 4. Gross negligence and corporate espionage, I cited from memory. Any executive found to have facilitated, knowingly or unknowingly, the transfer of proprietary data to a competitor forfeits all severance, all stock, and is liable for damages. Espionage? David laughed, but the sound was thin. I was flirting with a consultant, Elena. Don't be dramatic. Vanessa was just a girl. Was she? I clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the screen. It was Vanessa, but not in a cocktail dress. She was wearing a V-neck sweater, standing next to an older man on a golf course. They were holding a trophy. This is Vanessa, I narrated. Real name, Vanessa King. And the man she is hugging? That is Gregory King, CEO of Omnicorp, our biggest competitor. The color drained from David's face so fast it looked like he had been slapped. Brenda gasped, covering her mouth. "No," David whispered. "She told me she was freelance." "She lied, David," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "Just like you lied to me. But unlike you, she was good at it." I clicked the remote again. A server log appeared. Rows of red text on a black background. "Friday night," I pointed to the timestamp. 9:45 p.m. "While you were on the terrace planning my demise, your personal login credentials, CEO Sterling, were used to access our Level 5 secure server. The server that houses our blueprints, our client lists, and our financial projections for the next decade." I walked slowly toward David. He sank back into his chair, looking like a deflated balloon. "You gave her your password, didn't you?" I asked. "Because she told you she needed to upload a strategy document? Or maybe she just batted her eyelashes and said she wanted to help you modernize the company?" David didn't answer. He stared at the table, his hands shaking. 3 gigabytes of data, David," I said, leaning over the table, my face inches from his. "Sent directly to an external IP address registered to Omnicorp. You didn't just cheat on your wife. You handed the keys to our kingdom to the enemy. You committed corporate treason." I looked at Marcus Thorne. The lawyer was already packing his briefcase. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "I assume you are familiar with the penalties for facilitating corporate espionage? If you continue to represent this man in a severance claim, I will assume your firm is complicit in the theft." Thorne snapped his briefcase shut. He looked at David with pure disgust. "Mr. Sterling, you failed to disclose this information to us. Our representation ends immediately. You are on your own." The lawyers walked out. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. David and Brenda were left alone in the cold, cavernous room with me. The silence was deafening. This is the moment where the bully realizes he has no power, the moment where the gaslighter gets hit with the floodlight of truth. If you are enjoying this takedown, if you feel the satisfaction of seeing arrogance crushed by competence, please subscribe to the channel. Join our community of survivors and warriors. Because in the next video, we have a story about a husband who tried to fake his own death to avoid alimony, only to find out his wife had already planned his funeral, and she wasn't sad about it. "Elena." David's voice was broken. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know. I swear. She played me. I was a fool." "Yes, you were," I agreed. "But stupidity isn't a defense in a court of law, and it certainly isn't a defense in my boardroom. Please," he begged, reaching for my hand. I pulled back as if he were contagious. "The stock options, that's my retirement. That's everything I have. If you take that, I'm destitute. I have nothing." "You have your youth," I said, echoing the words he had used about Vanessa. "Maybe you can find a rich older woman to support you. I hear the market is tough, though." I turned to Brenda. She was crying silently, her makeup running down her face in black streaks. "And you," I said. "You vouched for her. You brought the spy into our house. You are an accessory. I've already forwarded these logs to the FBI. I suggest you find a criminal defense attorney, Brenda, and not a cheap one." "Get out," I said quietly. "Elena," David started. "Get out!" I screamed. The sound tore through my throat, a release of 25 years of suppressed anger. "Get out of my building! Get out of my life! Before I have security throw you through that window!" David scrambled out of the chair. He and Brenda practically ran to the door. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They looked like what they had always been, parasites who had finally been detached from the host. I watched them leave. I was shaking. My heart was pounding like a hammer against my ribs. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I watched as they stumbled out onto the sidewalk, looking lost in the bustling city. I had won the war. I had saved the company. But as I stood there, looking at the empty chair at the head of the table, I realized the final twist wasn't over. Because while David was losing his past, he was about to realize that Vanessa had left him with a parting gift that would haunt him forever. Aqui está a parte 4 e final, expandida, do roteiro número 3. Fechamos esta saga com uma conclusão épica. Não é apenas sobre vencer. É sobre obliterar o passado e renascer. Helena descobre que a melhor vingança é uma vida bem vivida e extremamente lucrativa, enquanto David percebe tarde demais que ele era apenas um peão no jogo de outra pessoa. Script Retrice expanded, Part 4, The Cleans, The Aftermath, plus The Final Betrayal, plus The New Reign. 6 months have passed since the red wedding in the boardroom. The seasons have changed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. The gray skies of November have given way to the vibrant, unapologetic bloom of May. Vance Global didn't crumble without David. In fact, it thrived. It turns out that when you remove a CEO who spends his mornings golfing and his afternoons flirting with consultants and replace him with someone who actually reads the reports, productivity skyrockets. Our stock price is up 18% since the announcement of the leadership restructuring. I stepped back into the CEO role temporarily at first, just to steady the ship. But last week, the board of directors voted unanimously to remove the interim from my title. I accepted. I realized I liked the view from the big chair. It suits me. As for the dream team of David, Brenda, and Vanessa, their fall was not a graceful descent. It was a crash landing. David tried to crawl back, of course. Narcissists always do. They believe their charm is a currency that never devalues. A month after the firing, I ran into him. It wasn't at a gala or a premiere. It was at a coffee shop in the financial district, a place he used to turn his nose up at because they didn't offer table service. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked 10 years older. His hair, usually dyed and coiffed to perfection, was graying at the temples and thinning. He wasn't wearing one of his bespoke Italian suits. He was wearing a jacket that looked like it came off a rack at a department store, and it was slightly wrinkled. He saw me ordering my latte. He hesitated, then approached. "Elena," he said. His voice lacked that booming baritone confidence. It sounded small. "You look good." "I am good, David," I replied, not looking up from my phone. "I'm busy. What do you want?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I messed up, Elena. I know that. But you have to understand. Vanessa, she played me. She manipulated me." I finally looked at him. I looked for the man I had loved for 25 years. I searched his eyes for any trace of the partner I thought I had. But all I saw was a stranger. A weak, desperate stranger. "She played you?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," David insisted, leaning in, desperate for an ally. "She disappeared the moment I lost the severance package. She won't answer my calls. I went to her apartment, and the doorman said she moved out. She used me, Elena. She set me up to steal that data. I was a victim too." I laughed. It started as a chuckle and bubbled up into a genuine laugh that drew stares from the other patrons. "You weren't a victim, David," I said, stepping closer to him so he could hear the steel in my voice. "You were a volunteer. You volunteered to betray your wife. You volunteered to leak company secrets because a pretty girl stroked your ego. You weren't a victim of a mastermind. You were just an easy mark." "But she's gone," David cried. "She ruined my life and left." "She didn't just leave, David," I said, delivering the final blow. "I heard through the grapevine, meaning my lawyers, that Vanessa just got a massive promotion at Omnicorp, VP of Strategy. It seems the data you handed her was very useful. She didn't love you. She used you as a ladder. How does it feel to be the rung someone steps on with muddy shoes?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, mouth slightly open, the realization crashing down on him. The younger, smarter woman hadn't admired him. She had laughed at him. "Goodbye, David," I said, grabbing my coffee. "Enjoy your coffee. Try not to spill it on that suit. It looks like it stains easily." I walked out and didn't look back. Brenda's fate was quieter, but equally satisfying. She is back where she started before I saved her, unemployed and bitter. She tried to send me emails threatening to write a tell-all book about the Vance family secrets. My legal team responded with a cease and desist letter so heavy it probably cost more to mail than her monthly rent. It reminded her of the non-disclosure agreement she signed in 2018 in exchange for her stock options. We haven't heard a peep from her since. I didn't just divorce David. I excised him. I bought out his minority shares for pennies on the dollar because he was desperate for cash to pay his legal defense fees against the shareholder lawsuit. He is currently living in a small apartment across town, driving a used sedan, and facing a potential indictment for corporate negligence. Tonight, I sit in my father's office, looking out at the city skyline. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkle like diamonds against the velvet night. I used to think I needed a partner to run this empire. I used to think I was soft, because I cared about people. But I realized something important during that anniversary party, standing on that stage with a microphone in my hand. Kindness isn't weakness. Loyalty isn't stale. These are the foundations of real power. David mistook my silence for ignorance, and that was his fatal error. I opened the velvet box sitting on my desk. Inside was a new necklace. I bought it for myself yesterday to celebrate my 26th anniversary, the anniversary of my freedom. It's a platinum shark tooth, encrusted with diamonds. A little reminder from my father, to all the women out there who are being told they are past their prime, or too emotional, or just a wife. Don't believe the lie. You are not the background character in your husband's movie. You are the director. You hold the camera. You write the script. And if the leading man forgets his lines or tries to rewrite the ending, fire him. There are plenty of other actors waiting for an audition. And honestly, the monologue is much better when you perform it alone. Thank you for watching this story of justice. I hope it reminded you that you are stronger than you think, and that sometimes the best upgrade you can get is trading a toxic husband for your own peace of mind. But if you think corporate betrayal is bad, you need to see the story on your screen right now. It's about a husband who won the lottery, $10 million, and didn't tell his wife. He secretly divorced her to keep the money all to himself, thinking he was a genius. But he made one tiny, catastrophic mistake. He bought the winning ticket using her credit card. Click the video to see the judge's reaction when the wife's lawyer presents the receipt. It is pure gold and the look on his face is priceless.